Welcome back to Unfiltered and Into the Deep, where we dive headfirst into the truths we've been taught and the ones that are actually ours. And today I want to talk to you about what's an absolute truth. So, most of what we believe is true isn't actually truth. It's what we believe to be true. It's conditioning. And I've been sitting with this question, been pondering it probably for like the last 6 months. And we've had family supper conversations of like, is that actually true? How much of what we call truth is just something we are taught to believe or we've experienced, so now we've taken it on as truth. But ultimately, it's what we choose to believe. Because I think a lot of us are living inside these limits that we think are facts, when really they're inherited beliefs, they're conditioned beliefs, they're experiential beliefs, and something is true until it isn't. And if it can fall into that category, then it's not an absolute truth. So just like a simple one of this. For decades, prior to 1954, doctors, scientists, sports experts all said that running a mile in under 4 minutes was physically impossible. Many even believed at that time the human heart would explode or the muscles would collapse because of the strain. And so the world record was stalled at 4 minutes and 1 second for 9 flippin' years. And then this guy, Roger Bannister, I believe, and he wasn't a runner. He was like amateur, they called him. And he had a minimal training regimen. He was a junior doctor in London, and he only had about 45 minutes a day to train, often having to fit it into his lunch breaks. But he did it. He did it in 3 minutes and 0.91 second, or 3.91 minutes. I think I'm saying that wrong. You know what I'm saying. And then, truth be told, 46 days later, somebody else broke the record. And within a year, several other people also achieved the under 4 minute mile. And it was thought completely impossible. Okay. Now let's look at like an easy money example. Women in Canada, we gained the legal right to open a bank account in our own name without a husband's signature in 1964. Yes, 60 years ago. The year my mother was born. Crazy. Now, this legal change was a big step, right, towards female independence, because prior to this, we needed a spouse's permission to control our own money, to have our own bank account. And it wasn't actually until 2018 that the Pay Equity Act came into Canada. And so this was about ensuring like fair compensation for men and women in federally governed institutions. 2018. That's only like 8 years ago. So money in the hands of women is definitely a beautiful but newer concept. And my point is, big money in the hands of women is fresh. It's new. It's within the last century. But it would have been argued to be an absolute truth in the 50s and the 40s that if a woman is married, she is to stay home and not have her own income, bank account. Now, these were our grandmothers. And it has me thinking about like my sweet Nana when she was still able to speak, which was, this conversation was well over a decade ago. Well over, probably 12, 14 years ago. And she's now sadly nonverbal with the crap of dementia and Alzheimer's. But I remember her being a little disappointed, shall we say, which wasn't like her, with a cousin of ours who decided at the time to keep her firstborn in full-time daycare while she was on mat leave with her second. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, but like not that big of a deal, because I could really see both sides of it. I also know that at the time, this woman in our family was the most career driven. She was the most successful female family member I knew. And I had a ton of respect for that, even if I didn't like really fully understand it. I didn't even know what she did, if I'm honest. Now, little did I realize at that time, I was also taking on the belief that to be a successful businesswoman, I wouldn't be able to care for my kids full time. That is not an absolute truth. You know, I went out to unschool my kids a few years ago. What was it, 4 years ago, maybe? 4, I think. And the first month they were home was the biggest financial month in my business for that year. It was May, and I had worked on my beliefs around this that month so like religiously. I was devoted to making it work. I did not want to be rushed. I did not want to be working all the time while my kids were home. And I wanted to build the truth for myself that it was all possible, that I could do and have both the career, the money, and the family life I desired. Because I think a lot of us live inside these limits that we think are facts, when really they're just inherited and learned beliefs, right? So absolute truth to me isn't what society has just agreed upon. It's what remains when I strip away that fear, when I strip away the conditioning and who I was taught or who I heard about or where I learned it. I really question, is this the truth? And I have done that for years now. I would not have done the things I've done financially, business-wise, family-wise, travel-wise, moving to a new province if I just accepted truth. So truth will typically feel expansive, and if we're looking at it or feeling it within our body, conditioning will feel restrictive, it will feel limiting, it will feel like I can't have or do this because ... And at some point, someone else's limitation became that truth. And I never questioned it because it sounded logical, because it sounded responsible, which is, again, just a conditioned, learnt belief. And so if I look at this in my own life, especially when it comes to money, like, is it an absolute, actual truth that I'm irresponsible with money? I have invested tens of thousands of dollars into myself at times when that money was not just sitting in my bank account. Now, should everyone do this? No. Do not invest in yourself if it's from a place of self-sabotage or a should. But sometimes we'll have that inner knowing. So when I first was doing this, the narrative would come. There was like this little voice that could easily say, that's irresponsible, Jen. That's reckless. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't do that. And so I kept a lot of it to myself. I didn't share with like extended family, or the only person I would talk to about it was Blake. And it was usually after I had already invested. And if you've heard my story of like I think it was the last podcast, go back and listen to that if that triggered something for you around conversations with Blake and money and investing in myself. So when I think back to these times that I did have that sneaky little narrative that would come in of like, this is irresponsible, this is reckless. There was one time I took all of the money out of RRSPs, which was like a big no-no. Like, my dad was a banker. My parents started RSPs at a young age. Like, that was a big no-no in my family. Like, that money is not to be touched except for retirement. And I did touch it. And will my retirement be that much better because of it? Yeah. Right? And so instead of saying that was responsible, I took on the truth. I flipped the truth of what money is supposed to look like for me. So is it responsible only if I have a savings account, if I have a holding onto it, if I'm never betting on myself, if I just save up for that, if I don't touch my rainy day fund, if I don't touch my savings fund? I really had to work through a lot of those. And I built a new truth, I would say, around this of like responsibility is actually trusting myself. It's making aligned decisions. It's investing in my expansion. And there was a lot of, if I go first, this will expand our family. Because I couldn't justify, rationalize it to my husband. And so I'm not saying that every investment is perfectly aligned or that we just throw money around and we call it growth. I have seen that time and again. That's not it. But I am saying that the label we place on our decisions matters. Because if I decide that means I'm irresponsible, if I had decided that, then I would start showing up as the person who can't trust herself. But when I look back at those same decisions and see I was backing myself, I was choosing expansion, I was willing to go first, I was willing to lead, that creates a completely different identity. So is it absolute truth? Or is it a perspective that is shaped by fear, by conditioning, by what we've been taught is safe? I think a lot of us aren't stuck because of our actions. We're stuck because of the meaning we've attached to them. Rewind that, listen to that again, jot it down, sit with it. A lot of us aren't stuck because of our actions. We're stuck because of the meaning we've attached to them. Because I've also felt the contraction in my body when I've made those decisions, and I've had to learn the difference between fear and misalignment. And trust me, I have made some hefty investments out of misalignment because I should invest at this level. That's not the answer. So maybe the question isn't, is it responsible or irresponsible? Maybe the question is this aligned? And am I willing to trust myself either way? Big. I've also been like sitting with this and having conversations with clients around like, this isn't something we just figure out once. Like you don't just uncover a truth and then you're done. This comes up again and again and again at every new level with more nuance, more depth. And sometimes I think we've been taught that if something comes back, if we repeat a pattern, let's say, is how we look at it, means we didn't heal it or we didn't do it right. But I don't think that's true. I think the depth of the healing of that is usually generations deep. And so it's going to take some levels and layers and complexities and nuances to come into the experiential life for that to heal fully. Because every time we stretch into something new, anything that isn't aligned with that new identity of self will surface. I heard this line the other day, and, I've heard it. The line is new level, same devil. But I've always heard it as new level, new devil. But it's not. It's new level, same devil. And this is usually where we slow ourselves down. We get frustrated and we make something mean that maybe this isn't for me. But it's, in my experience, the moment before everything shifts. So this work isn't about arriving somewhere where nothing ever gets triggered again. Nothing gets activated. That's boring as shit. It's becoming the woman who knows how to move with it when it does. Right? So even recently, we were sitting in box seats at a hockey game and my kids just walked in like it was normal, like it was theirs. If you've seen this post, you know what I'm talking about. And I had this moment because I remember being a kid sitting way up in the nosebleeds, and that felt like a big, big deal there. And then I had this realization of like, neither of those are truth. They're just different realities. That felt normal at the time, the nosebleeds. But now the box seats feel normal too. And so what feels normal to us will start to feel like a truth, even if it's just what we've been exposed to. So when I really sit with this, when I really look at things I've called truth in my life, especially around money, around what's responsible, what's allowed, I can see how much of it was never actually mine. It was inherited, it was observed, it was repeated enough times that it started to feel real. And I think this is where we get stuck again, because we don't question the truth we're building our entire lives upon. So we try to expand, we try to grow, we try to create something different, but we're doing it from a foundation that was never designed for the life we actually want, right? So of course it feels hard. Of course it feels far away. Of course it feels unrealistic at times, because you're not just expanding your life, you're expanding beyond the truth you were given. And that's not a one-time thing. That is a continual unfolding. It is noticing again and again where you have picked up something and called it truth, when really it was just something you learned. So instead of making that mean you're behind or you haven't figured it out yet, what if that's the actual work? What if every time that comes up, it's not there to stop you, it's there to show you when you're ready to expand? So when you have a dream that feels too big, too unrealistic, too far away, it's not necessarily because it's not meant for you. It's because it doesn't match the truth you were given. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to question that. If you want to go deeper into this, I'm going to link below in the show notes my workshop I did last year. It's a 3-part series. It's so freaking good. The money you're meant for. Dive in. There's over 2 hours of chats around identity and self and truth and money and value and what you're making it mean. I love you. Go have the best day.